one of my favorite topics is AI polling. I interviewed these guys like before the election. It's Aaru. They're like these two kids who are either just out of college or should have been in class, who started this company, where they're doing like AI polling. And it was promising. It turned out that the results of they created like these digital twins of like fictional voters, and it turned out their results were basically as bad as real polling. So they were right in line with the with very
but
bad,
cheaper, presumably cheaper.
Cheaper, yeah, exactly, and potential to scale too. So.
Yeah, that's like that joke about like the Jewish grandmother who was like the complaint that the food at the wedding was horrific and the portions were so small. It's like, it's
right.
funny to be like, I've got incorrect polling data for you, but I can give you, I can make it scale.
Right, exactly. There's promise that it can get better. I think it's so. I know you're not a pollster. You work for Google at Jigsaw.
Yes.
And
yes,
and this is not just your I guess your goal here is like essentially like creating technology to help democracy and transparency, right? Did I get that right, or would you put it differently?
Yes, I love yeah. Thank you for like allowing me to clarify kind of our entry point to what kind of looks like a new approach to polling or focus grouping. It actually comes from trying to make conversation spaces work better online. We've had I was supposed to, like, I've been working in tech for 2 decades, and like we've always had this promise of like the digital public square, that we're going to be able to communicate with each other and really effectively, and ideas and free marketplace of discourse, and we haven't really scratched the surface of it. In some ways we've retarded our ability to talk to each other at all, and so we had the kind of period of the forums and chat rooms, and then we had like the feed with social media, and they were all ways to try to get more of us together interacting, but we weren't. There's so many problems that are unsolved, and what we were trying to do here, we at Jigsaw we have this tool that is the most popular free tool for moderating comment spaces called Perspective API. Right. That's used by a ton of like publishers like New York Times, Wall Street Journal. It's used on Reddit. It's used on Wikipedia talk pages. But it's very popular, billions of users a day. But and it was used to help moderators of conversation find things that they do want to elevate or not. But even though we had this really popular tool, it was kind of apparent that we weren't solving the bigger problem of helping us talk to each other online. So we said, what if we could just actually, rather than trying to plug into a landscape that is, maybe limited in how well it can serve us, why don't we try and like create a conversation space from scratch? And we started earlier this year in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is my favorite place in the country, where we helped the judge executive of the county have what was the largest town hall in U.S. history, which was amazing, and I'd love to tell you about it, and inspired us to try to, and the goal was, could we get all his constituents to talk to him and guarantee to them that he will listen? This theme of listening, I think that's been the epiphany for this year, is people actually really care about being heard, and it's an unmet need. And so we're like, could we take this from county to country? So we just completed kind of like a focus group of America, 2,400 people, a microcosm of America across demographics, political affiliation, and even, which is, I think, unprecedented, having 5 people plus from every single congressional district, all 435 congressional districts. And we're like, let's let them talk, and let's solve for the problems of conversations. What is it that stops very large conversations being effective? It is, turn taking, that you need to take turns. That doesn't work when you're very many people. It is kind of like the loudest voices, or the kind of 99-1 rule that we know about online, that most people are lurkers. A few people contribute a little bit, and then the 1% dominate everything. And can we, can we then structure and synthesize and actually find through lines that people agree on? So that's what we've been working on. It does seem like it's very relevant to the polling industry, but that wasn't necessarily our starting intention.
Right. Yeah. No, you're not trying to. Google's not becoming a polling company. But I think it's. And I started out talking about this company, Aaru. Their approach is obviously different. I mean, there's 2 ways you could think about using AI for polling. Like, you could create essentially digital twins of voters, or people, citizens, or you could actually use it to allow people who are, being polled to just talk longer, right? Which you can't do, I mean, most people don't even answer the phone, or it's not, I don't even think polling's,
Right.
it's like not really done by over the phone anymore, which is a huge problem in
Right.
accuracy. But,
Right.
it's just people they're not going to sit there and chat forever, and there's not enough resources to have someone listen, right? Or read. So AI sort of
Totally. Yeah.
allows you to do that, right? It's
Yeah, and yeah, I think that and we joked a little bit about the kind of getting incorrect polls, but using a method that scales. I think like that there is just a structural limitation on the helpfulness of polling in that you are not in conversation with someone and they are not in conversation with other people and reacting to other people's statements or views. So it's the pollster. It's very hypothesis driven. Like the pollster has to come with what's the binaries that I want your opinion on. It's very difficult to get even 1 or 2 words, never mind like 7 or 8 words. And then on the other side, I want to talk. I don't usually fetishize like words, but we did get a lot of words with our We the People. So I do want to tell you about like how it went for us, because I understand
millions of words, right?
So many millions of words, more words that was spoken, more words than were spoken in every episode of Sopranos across 7 seasons. It's a lot of words. This is like compared to polling, which struggles to get anything out of you. And then the alternative, which is much deeper, is focus groups. You get a lot of words in focus groups, but you get like so few people. You get a dozen people. So, understanding public sentiment is so important, not just to government officials and people who are running for public office, but for companies who want to understand their customers. And so the fact that we've kind of had these kind of like very constrained options of polling, which is broad but shallow, and focus groups, which is deep but small, has limited us. And so I think we're starting to crack the nut of what it looks like to engage people differently, hear from people differently.
Yeah, and not to go too deep into what you did, because I think people should go read the paper, which we can link to. But I mean, you had was 2,400 people, right, total. So I think that one thing that really jumped out at me was that they actually had sort of a different view after they came out of the polling. So like this process itself, this having someone listen, or some, I guess in this case a chatbot listen, it actually kind of gave them more of like an open-minded view about, or maybe that's not the right term, but I don't think that happens in normal polling, right? Or focus groups. Like people don't usually come out with like a different view, or
Firstly, you mentioned something before, and we probably should just clarify. There is the synthetic polling. You use AI to create the digital twins, and then there is this, where how we used AI. So we had the real people, and we got them to talk through AI. So we had a conversational assistant that was teasing out words, 2 million words or 1.7 million words, and then we use AI to take all of that content and figure out the views. So we got 10,000 views from those 1.6 million words. And then we took and the interesting thing is at the beginning of this conversation, this virtual conversation, everyone talked at the same time. So like think about like having a group of like even 20 people at a dinner or a meeting and having everyone talk. I mean, it doesn't. So they all got to talk. And it's very difficult to listen if you haven't said your piece. I mean, I assume. I mean, I'm a very good listener, but I assume that others find it difficult. The fact that everyone gets to talk, you've said your piece, and then the second round is all about listening. And so the AI organizes everything. You can like the metaphor I use is like a Google Maps, but not for geographical terrain, for opinion terrain. So it organizes what everyone said and gives it back to you in a way that you can navigate. Like there were like at a high level 26 opinions, and you can dig in and figure out what people thought. And then there were some things that you agree with and not. This part of it, this like focus group part of it, where everyone talks and then everyone listens and they respond, it was nuanced, it was rich, it was also a bit spicy. It was a little bit what you might expect if you let people really talk. But it was grounded in people's lived experience. So the role of the AI was kind of like we actually had a few personas for the AI, but we gave the AI the persona of a kind neighbor to try to tease out more from you about like why you have the opinions that you hold today. So you're engaging with people like not as memes of like positions that you associate with political parties, but just in terms of how their own journey to get there. So you have this incredible back and forth, so much content. And then at the end, we use AI to find where there was agreement among people. And we weren't actually trying to move their opinions. So at the end, and this was, we were kind of, Jigsaw was playing a role as a technology partner to Neapolitan Institute, who was hosting the conversation. They have a lot of experience with polling. They kind of led the recruitment and the kind of overall structure of it. And they said, we don't want to move. We're trying to surface what unites Americans in advance of the 250th birthday celebration that's coming up for the country. We are not trying to change what they agree on. We're trying to surface it. And the way that we checked for that actually is at the end, when we got these statements of ideals, like these things they agreed on, we actually did an independent poll with a completely different set of Americans and found that there was equal support for these statements.
Huh, that's really interesting. You mentioned earlier that you talked about sort of the promise of the web and the fact that, we'd have this digital town hall, and how great would that be? It's almost like this utopian idea. Everyone can talk, everyone can have a voice, and it hasn't really quite turned out like we had hoped. At least in terms of online discourse, I think we can all agree on that. Certainly there are some positives, but the part of that is the business model of how all this developed, right? Like social media that became a way to sell ads, and of course with ads, like you need to get people to keep scrolling, and so then you have these algorithms that end up that people sort of, I guess, consciously or unconsciously learn, and then there's sort of it just leads to this place of like outrage and rage bait and that kind of stuff, which just keeps the whole flywheel going. So in a sense, like it's not so much that humans talking to each other online is the problem. It's like the business model of online is a big part of that too. So I'm just curious if you think, I mean, in this AI world, like what you learned in this experiment says anything about like, could we do this differently? Like, could there be a business model that actually incentivizes these more constructive conversations online?
Oh, I'd like to think yes. I feel like the bit that we're working on is the structure of the conversation. So like when you had the kind of the forum earlier, era of the internet, it was very small. Like you found your community online and there was like a chat room or something that you could go in, and it was very small. And then with social media, you had this feed that helped us kind of all potentially be in discourse with each other. But the feed, as you're saying, came with it. Well, what is what is it that we look at or click on, and what does the feed prioritize? And I think that's where you really start to get this, like a lot of people opting out of participating altogether. Like we did some research like a couple of years ago now, and found that like people's number one concern with posting online was social sanctioning, fear of social sanctioning. So like we're really, really concerned about most of us, I think especially like to be very young. To be young is always to be worried about being judged. And in this moment, we are more susceptible to feeling scrutinized or, maybe canceled than ever before. So to be young in this moment, I think is debilitating. We both have kids, so we care about that. So I think what's really powerful about what we've done with We the People is every single voice. Some people spoke a bit more than others, but everybody contributed. And when we give back, I mentioned like this Google Maps of opinion, when we take all the words that are shared and we show it back to you so you can see what do your fellow Americans think, everyone's voice is included in that. So you didn't get prime position because you were super, clickbaity or salacious. Everyone was kind of represented at least once. So I don't know about, I don't know if this is as sticky as, like an AI slop social media app. But I think that we don't have anywhere online to go. We don't have anywhere actually, because it's not like town halls work, because they're not representative. We don't have anywhere that is a very high signal to noise ratio for what people think. And so I'm excited to think that that's now possible. One of the metrics that we had a ton of metrics for this project, including things that were kind of quantitative and, eval related to do with how the AI is performing. But the one that was our real North Star was going back to all the 2,400 people who completed and asking them, do you feel represented by this conversation? Does the process and the outcome in terms of statements that we agreed on, do you feel that it represents your voice. And you think about asking that to people, about like the kind of civic conversations that play out in town halls or what's happening on social media. 94% of people said, I feel represented by the conversation, and 0% of people said that they didn't.
Right.
So I'm just excited that we can, that like we're like continuing to build a kind of a better digital public square, because we now have a new space for people to engage each other.
Do you think there was any sense though that it was an activity that they sort of enjoyed and would maybe come back to in the way that we all sort of, got addicted to social media? Or I didn't really, but
yeah, I mean, I would like to see political candidates and people governing using this tool, because one of the things we learned in Bowling Green when we started out there, this town in Kentucky was doubling in size over the next 2 decades, which was amazing, jobs, growth, etc. But people were actually kind of nervous about the infrastructure that would be required to grow that fast, and like whether it would kind of crush the town. They were concerned about migrants, interestingly, not from like Mexico or Latin America, but from Nashville, Tennessee, coming to Bowling Green and like diluting like their culture. And they had a lot of concerns, and that this very inspiring judge executive, like the mayor of the county, said, I want to hear from everyone. If we, either this change happens to us because we're growing, or it happens for us. And if we want it to happen for us, we should come together and set a vision for Bowling Green. But there's no way to come together when you're so many people. They're like 100,000 people. So that's where we designed this virtual town hall with him, and we did a lot of marketing to get people to know about it. But the first big question was, will anyone want to participate? Like, does anyone care about being in a civic conversation? Like, if you look at town halls, there are 8 people that show up to a local town hall. So we did this month-long town hall. 8,000 people participated. So 1,000 exit. That was 1 in every 10 residents, basically. And everyone's really stunned. Like, people give a damn. They will show up if you make it possible for them. But then the local leaders were like, well, the people who actually go to a public town hall are invariably the detractors. The people who are motivated are the ones who don't want the thing to happen. And so they said, who is it that we're hearing from? When we get 8,000 people, is it just 8,000 of those guys? In which case we were better off not, with 8.
Right.
And that was the stunning thing, was that there were like 4,000 policy proposals, 1 million votes, and more than 80% of the policy proposals had near universal support. So once you do, there's a real benefit to having more people show up and be part of the conversation, because those local leaders and policymakers didn't know that they had the public mandate, because there's no way to learn that. And then I think we got this a lot in Bowling Green, but also with the project we just completed, the pilot of We the People, which is the nationwide kind of going from county to country, that people really, really care about being heard. And so, I think like when you think about like kind of like the legitimacy that comes from having real people in conversations, and then the agency that people feel from being in conversations, you start to kind of understand what we would be giving up by going the kind of synthetic polling route. There's something really magical and important, I think, for us as societies to hold on to in terms of coming together in large groups and exchanging ideas.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you increase participation, for sure. I mean, you're basically describing like the NIMBYism problem, right? Which here in California has led to this massive housing crisis and other problems. And, NIMBYism really relies on the fact that there's low participation, right, in politics, because especially local politics. It's like people, because I think you're right. I mean, most people would be sort of in favor of a lot of these proposals, but you have a few people, can sort of gum up the whole thing if there's not much participation. So what you're describing is like, essentially, it's a way to get people more to participate in politics more, but ultimately, don't they have to vote? Like, was there any? Have you seen any results yet of? Did those people actually go out and vote? Did they? Are they more engaged now in general, or was it a one-time thing?
That's what the research suggests. Yeah, the research suggests, but this is like going back and asking people, and they both felt that they had more faith that their local leaders would respond to them and they would advocate for this type of process. Also, that was in Bowling Green. For We the People, which is the nationwide pilot we just did, we asked people, the metric on feeling heard is really stunning. We asked people going in, what do you feel heard by other Americans, fellow Americans? And the answer was 40% of people said yes. And then after just an hour in this virtual conversation, they said that number jumped to 68%. So like just by being in conversation, you get something so much more, like people's idea of like how we're doing. I feel like we look at the internet and like we have like societal self-loathing. I think we look at what's going on online and we think we're awful. Like individually we're okay, but together we don't function. And it's not true. It doesn't have to be that way. Like you said, I mean, there are business model reasons, but there's also just like the first, I think there's like legacy model reasons, like that, when I remember when Elon Musk brought Twitter, and then there was like this rush to create alternative social media platforms, and they all just took the same template as Twitter.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't want to, spoil the ending of this movie for you guys, but you know how it ends when you get like a lot of users. And
Right.
yeah, so I think we're overdue some innovation in social discourse.
Yeah, so you're kind of making a blueprint for politics, but also just for, I don't know, for entrepreneurs in a sense. Like there's something there that to build on, right? If you can create a product that's sticky,
Yeah.
that does this, that would be huge. A bit like it's because it feels a bit like eating your vegetables, to be honest. It's like, oh, you got to go to the town hall meeting. But there's something that people enjoy about it as well. Like maybe if that expands to other areas.
Yes.
And we know people
And
love talking to these things, right? I mean,
they do. They feel heard. I think that is the thing, actually. I think that's the thing that kind of the revealed preference of social media was, I guess, how much we like clickbait or, salacious stuff, or, like those algorithms were trained on our revealed preferences. I think the thing that we're starting to see as a revealed preference is how much people want to feel heard. And maybe that's why chatbots are taking off so much, because in this private space, especially, we did this research study with Gen Z on AI, and I remember this quote from one young lady who said, "The chatbot can't cancel me. The chatbot can't cancel me." That's like, I feel really safe here. But I think you can feel safe in the environment that we've created because it's anonymous and you'll definitely be heard. So maybe that's the thing, to your provocation, maybe that's the thing that we need to build on top of, is giving people a sense of participation and feeling heard, because I think that is a human need, and there's no online offering at the moment that gives us that.
Yeah. Do you think that ultimately, though, I guess predicting outcomes of elections or just really understanding how people feel about specific issues accurately is one of the outcomes of this, and is that important, do you think?
I mean, to the extent that understanding what the public want is, presumably it's good for all institutions and parts of society to have their decisions be informed by truly what people's wants and needs, and not skewed by the people who are the loudest or, the most organized at showing up at town halls. So I think it is a very positive development if we could have fora like this. And from what we've heard from policymakers, there is a real interest in having, mechanisms that kind of give you the scale of polls, but the depth of focus groups. There's a real hunger to have that insight.
You kind of, I mean, you sort of, you already said you don't think, the answer is the synthetic voter or citizen, right? But there is something, I mean, there is this, we talk a lot in AI now about like digital twins, right? And simulations, and, maybe the human brain is too complex to create like a simulation of society, but there is something there that's sort of like enticing, right? It's like to truly understand the world, because ultimately what we have right now in politics is like just a simplistic view. There's a couple of issues that we know get people fired up, and so we just like talk about those issues, but actually maybe there are lots of things that people would be interested in, having become big issues, but we just don't know because we don't have we don't have that simulation. I mean, is it, do you think there may be a place though, where Like I think about here where I live in Marin County, they built this Bay model back in like the 70s or something like that. It's basically, it's really cool. It's a museum now. It's basically like this model of the Bay Area with real water that simulates the tides. And every day that
Yeah.
the water comes in and goes out. And it was basically like what would happen if we built a dam or we dredged or we filled
Oh,
here,
cool.
because they didn't have computers, right? And
Yeah.
that's how they, how they did all the development in the Bay Area. So like you couldn't do that for I guess, society, at least not yet. But I mean, at some point, is that something
Yeah.
we should try to build? It sounds a little dystopian, but like, I don't know.
Not when you
Is
talk
that
about the tide coming in. I think that's a very nice, yeah, tide washing. Um, I think that the challenge is like, how do you know if I mean, this is kind of like the perennial challenge with like large language models is evals. When you have these probabilistic models and you're also attempting things that you might not have a corollary for in the real world. How do you know? And so in my mind, in order to know that you had a model that was accurate, you would need to go and do the hard thing that you don't want to spend the money to do, which is go and test. And opinions are changing. Like we do not stay, static. We respond to things, and there's like things that are mimetic and viral. And so, yeah, I can theoretically imagine it working. I think you'd have to do a lot of work and be very self-disciplined about making sure that you truly are representing the population that you think you are.
right? Right. I mean, you couldn't just take census data, basically. I mean, you'd have to do what you did in this experiment, but on a massive scale, and somehow pull the data in from that and combine it with census data, and then test
No,
it
I know.
or
I
something.
read someone Substack about this recently, where they were talking about synthetic polling, and they were like modeling the US and and Scandinavian countries on various topics, including like, I don't know, climate or the death penalty. And then they'd say, this is how the LLM came out. It said, this is how Swedes feel about the death penalty. And then it said, but it's not actually 5% support. It's actually closer to 20%. And I was thinking, where are we getting the 20% from? And then it's a poll. So I'm just like, well, are we trusting polls right now? Like in We the People, we actually asked, do you feel how represented do you feel by the conversation? And it was 94%, and 94% of people said they did feel represented. And then the number for like polls was 47%. So people,
Right.
more people feel that polls don't represent them than feel that they do. So if we should not be using polls, just like you said, the polls and the synthetic polls were equally inaccurate. So we have to get ground truth from somewhere, and we can't get ground truth, and our claim to ground truth can't be legitimate unless we have it from people themselves. But as we kind of get into a world of increasingly sophisticated and autonomous AI, I think what's really coming into focus for us is what's the piece that we need to hold on to. What is like we do not want autocomplete. We do want autocomplete for our search queries. I believe that we want autocomplete for our lines of code. I don't think we want autocomplete for life. So what is the bit that's important to hold on to? And I think this civic discourse is firmly in that category.
I think one thing to address though is there's always going to be a backlash to this kind of stuff. Like I remember I was writing about Facebook back in 2014, and I wrote about this experiment they did this mood experiment where it was an academic research,
one.
right?
Yes,
Famous
yes.
mood experiment, right? And
Yes.
they were, I think very well meaning. And actually there's a huge uproar about this, right? How could Facebook possibly try to manipulate people? Oh my God, they're going to have so much power. But it turned out like the problem was actually not that. The problem was people would use Facebook to, against their terms of service to try to manipulate people in nefarious ways. That's sort of, so I wonder how there's so much like outrage, and I think just like knee-jerk backlash to any use of AI in any area of society. Like, how do we get past that so we can actually have a constructive conversation about like how we can use it for good? Because I think there's going to be people who will look at this and go like, this is so creepy. Like you're getting all this data from people, and I don't know. Maybe they won't, but I mean, at some point there will be like a
Yeah, sounds like you're giving them ideas, Reed. Thanks.
right. And people will be like outraged about something, and it just ends up. It's like the NIMBYism
Yeah.
of technology, right? And it just blocks progress. So how do you deal with
Yeah.
that?
And I feel that's real what you're describing, like in this moment that I think we just talk so much about an amorphous AI, or there's just a lot of headlines about what AI is going to do, I think both on the upside and the downside. And what we're trying to do at Jigsaw is, I'd say that there's like many other parts of Google that are trying to take AI to new heights, and we're trying to bring it back down to earth again and make it useful to people. So I think when we lead with the AI, I think people can get a little, suspicious or a little on guard because it sounds like you're just doing AI for its own sake. But I think when we lead with what's the problem, what's the real kind of enduring problem that we might be able to solve now, I think people are much more open and welcoming to AI. And so in this case, the idea is that like we still can't like just try to have 20 plus people together, in a meeting or at a dinner party or in any context, having many people in one place, the conversation starts to break down. And there's this line that I really there's this line that I like about it. It says like the conversation is the soul of democracy. What gives democracy its legitimacy is our ability to have an open exchange of ideas. And so it's not something that we can give up on. Like we have to stay in conversation together, even now when it feels hard. And so to be able to get so many people in microcosm of America with all the richness that involves together to be in conversation and to come out with areas, ideals that they agree on, and then to go back to them and say, did that feel good to you? And they say yes. It feels like something we should celebrate and build on top of.
Yeah. Well, this was a good conversation too. I appreciate it. Is there anything I didn't ask about that you wanna get across?
No, that's great. It was a good conversation. I'm going to end all my conversations about this with, and full marks. This is, as someone who thinks about conversations a lot, I think we did really well.
It's kind of a dad joke of an ending. Sorry about that. But no, it was super. It's just an intriguing topic. So I'd love to hear more about it as if and when you do more of these experiments, and just fun to think about and write about. So I appreciate
that's
it.
amazing, and I really enjoyed talking. I'm so happy to see that we were talking again. So yeah, and I'm guessing next week you're booked up, but just come by and see us, and we can show you what we're working on off the record.
Love to do that. Love to do that. And have a good Thanksgiving.
Cheers.
All right.
Ciao.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.